The great hall of Axiom Prime was silent. 12 species sat in their floating chairs, arranged in a perfect circle around the central platform. Light from a nearby neutron star poured through the crystal walls, painting everything in shades of blue and white. Ambassador Alara Vasquez stood alone on that platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice was strong. She had spoken for humanity in this hall for 15 years. She had smiled at their jokes. She had accepted their small insults. She had played their games. Today, she was not smiling. "I invoke Article 7, she said. The words echoed in the vast chamber. "The founding compact promises mutual defense. Earth is under threat. The Veth Kai Dominion has entered our space. They will reach our homeworld in less than 30 days. The alien representatives shifted in their seats. Some looked away. Others whispered to each other in languages older than human civilization. The Tyranny ambassador spoke first. He was a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms. His people had welcomed humanity into the Concord 100 years ago. They had called themselves friends. "The Council recognizes the threat," he said. His voice was smooth and calm. "However, we must consider the wider situation. The Veth Kai are powerful. War with them would cost many lives across many worlds." Vasquez felt her heart grow cold. "Article 7 does not mention cost. It promises protection." "Ambassador Vasquez," said another voice. This was the Meridian speaker, a being made of living crystal. "Humanity is young. You have been part of our Concord for only 1 century. Perhaps the Vethkai's anger is with your species alone. Perhaps this is not truly a Concord matter." "Not a Concord matter?" Vasquez repeated. She could not believe what she was hearing. "We followed every rule. We reduced our weapons. We opened our borders. We trusted you." The silence that followed was answer enough. One by one, the representatives voted. The Tyranny abstained. The Meridians voted no. The ancient Kethavori, who had not spoken in 50 years, simply closed their eyes. Every species found a reason. Too dangerous, too costly, too soon. Humanity stood alone. Vasquez watched the final count appear on the display above her. 0 votes in favor, 12 against or abstaining. The numbers burned into her memory. She thought of Earth. She thought of the 8 billion people who had trusted her to keep them safe. She thought of the children who had grown up believing the galaxy was a place of friendship and peace. She thought of what was coming for them. "Very well," she said. Her voice did not shake. She would not give them that. "Let the records show that on this day, the Galactic Concord abandoned its youngest member. Let the records show that humanity asked for help and received none." The Tyranny ambassador raised one of his hands. "Ambassador Vasquez, please understand, this is not personal. Politics requires difficult choices." Vasquez looked at him. She had shared meals with this being. She had laughed at his stories. She had believed, truly believed, that he cared about her people. "You are right," she said. "This is not personal. It is simply a lesson. And humanity has always been a quick learner." She stepped down from the platform. Her shoes clicked against the polished floor. Every eye in the chamber followed her. At the door, she stopped. She turned back to face them one last time. "You will remember this day," she said. "We will make certain of it." Then she was gone. The representatives looked at each other. Some felt relief. The problem had been handled. The Vethkai would destroy humanity, and the Concord would remain safe. It was unfortunate, but the galaxy was full of unfortunate things. The Tyranny ambassador felt something else. He had seen something in the human woman's eyes. Not anger, not fear, something colder, something patient. He told himself it did not matter. Humanity was weak. They had no real fleet, Their weapons were toys compared to the Vethkai war machine. In a month, perhaps two, there would be no more humans to worry about. He was wrong. Far away on the edge of the Sol system, the early warning satellites began to scream. Something was coming out of hyperspace near Jupiter. Something massive. Hundreds of ships. Thousands. The Vethkai had arrived. On Earth, the news spread quickly. People gathered in the streets, looking up at the sky. They had heard the Council's decision. They knew no help was coming. In the command center of the United Earth Defense Force, Fleet Admiral Konstantin Okoye stared at the tactical display. Red dots filled the screen. Each dot was an enemy ship. Each ship carried weapons that could burn a city to ash. His communications officer looked at him. "Admiral, what do we do?" Okoye was an old soldier. He had fought in small wars on Earth long ago, before humanity had reached the stars. He had hoped those days were behind him. He looked at the red dots. He looked at the small blue dots that represented his own fleet. So few, so very few. "We fight," he said. "We make them pay for every kilometer, every planet, every moon." "Sir, the odds." "I know the odds." Okoye turned to face his crew. These were good people, young people. They deserve better than this. "The galaxy has decided we are not worth saving. Let us show them what they have chosen to abandon." He gave his first orders. Ships began to move. Weapon systems came online. Across the solar system, humanity prepared for war. They were alone. They were outmatched. They were afraid. But they were not beaten. Not yet. Not ever. The stars watched in silence as the first human ships moved to meet the enemy. History held its breath. In far below, on 100 worlds, the flames began to rise. The first battle lasted 6 hours. The last human ship fighting near Jupiter, a small destroyer called the Defiance, rammed itself into a Vethkai carrier before it died. The explosion was visible from Earth. Admiral Okoye watched the footage in silence. 3,000 sailors had been on that ship. They had known they could not win. They had fought anyway. "Pull back to Saturn," he ordered. "Regroup at Titan." The retreat was ugly. The Vethkai were fast, faster than anyone had expected. Their ships moved like insects, darting and spinning in ways that should have been impossible. Their weapons cut through human shields like paper. Callisto fell on the third day. The colony there had held 2 million people. The Vethkai did not take prisoners. Titan's shipyards burned on the 5th day. The workers there had tried to launch every ship they could, even the unfinished ones. Some made it out. Most did not. By the end of the first week, humanity had lost half its fleet. The Vethkai had lost almost nothing. On Earth, people watched the news with hollow eyes. The government told them to stay calm. The shelters were ready. Help might still come. No help came. The Vethkai reached Mars on the 10th day. The colony there was smaller than Earth, only 50 million people. But it was humanity's first step into the stars. Children learned about it in school. Poets wrote songs about its red deserts. The Vethkai bombed it for 2 days straight. But something strange happened on Mars. A teenage girl named Yara, who lived in a small dome on the planet's southern pole, had been fixing old radio equipment when the attack began. She was not a soldier. She was not a scientist. She was just a girl who liked to take things apart and put them back together. She noticed something in the Vethkai signals, a pattern, a weakness. Working through the night, while the sky burned above her, she built a jamming device from spare parts. It was ugly. It should not have worked. But when she turned it on, the Vethkai ships near her dome suddenly lost their targeting systems. They fired wildly, hitting nothing. A human patrol ship, badly damaged and running out of power, used the confusion to escape. The story spread quickly. Within days, engineers across the system were copying Yara's design. It was not enough to win, but it was enough to slow the enemy down. The Vethkai had expected humanity to surrender after the first week. They had conquered 43 species. All of them had surrendered. All of them had begged for mercy. Humanity did not beg. On the asteroid belt, mining crews turned their drilling lasers into weapons. They hid among the rocks, waiting for Vethkai scouts, then attacked without warning. They died in large numbers. They kept attacking. Near Neptune, a group of research scientists crashed their station into a Vethkai supply ship. They left a message in the wreckage. "Tell your masters we are not afraid." On Earth, the strikes began. Kinetic weapons fell from the sky, faster than any defense could stop. Sao Paulo was hit first, then Mumbai, then Lagos. Millions died in seconds. The fires burned for days. Admiral Okoye stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Prometheus, and watched his homeworld burn. He had been born in Lagos. His mother was still there, had been there. He did not cry. There would be time for tears later, if there was a later. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "we have received a message from Lunar Command." Okoye turned. "What message?" "They say they found something in the old archives, something called Project Ember." Okoye frowned. He had never heard of Project Ember. "What is it?" "They won't say over open channels, but they say it changes everything. They need your authorization to proceed." Okoye looked at the tactical display. More red dots were appearing every hour. The Vethkai were bringing their main fleet now. When it arrived, there would be nothing left to defend. "Authorize it," he said. "Whatever it is, authorize it." 3 hours later, a shuttle brought him to the moon. Deep beneath the surface, past security doors that had not been opened in a century, he found a room filled with old computers and older secrets. A woman was waiting for him there. She was very old, her hair white, her hands shaking, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Admiral Okoye," she said, "my name is Dr. Yuki Tanaka. I built what is in this room. I have been waiting a very long time for someone to need it." She showed him the files, the designs, the locations of hidden factories, sleeping ships, weapons that humanity had built in secret and then buried. Okoye read the reports with growing disbelief. This is a war machine, a real one. Why did no one know about this?" Dr. Tanaka smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Because the Concord made us promise to be peaceful. So we smiled and signed their treaties and told them what they wanted to hear. And then? And then we prepared, just in case." She looked at him with those sharp old eyes. "They told us to be sheep, Admiral. We became wolves dressed in wool. And now it is time to take off the wool." Okoye stared at the files for a long moment. Outside, Earth was burning. His people were dying. The galaxy had abandoned them. He thought about the Defiance ramming itself into the enemy. He thought about Yara and her radio. He thought about the miners and the scientists and all the ordinary people who had refused to give up. "Wake them," he said. "Wake them all." Dr. Tanaka nodded. She pressed a button, and across the solar system, in hidden places, in hollowed asteroids and buried factories, machines began to stir. Lights flickered on. Engines hummed to life. Humanity had been hiding its claws. Now it was time to use them. The first Ember-class dreadnought rose from the darkness near Neptune. It had been sleeping inside a hollowed asteroid for 70 years, waiting for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Its name was Retribution. It was 3 kilometers long. Its hull was black, designed to drink light rather than reflect it. Its weapons had no names in any Concord database because no one in the Concord had ever seen anything like them. The Vethkai patrol that found it did not have time to send a warning. Admiral Okoye watched the battle footage with Dr. Tanaka at his side. The Retribution had destroyed 12 enemy ships in less than 4 minutes. It had not been damaged. It had not even slowed down. "How many of these do we have?" he asked. 17 dreadnoughts, Tanaka replied. 200 heavy cruisers, over 1,000 smaller attack ships, all hidden, all waiting. For 100 years. We joined the Concorde because we had to, Admiral, but we never trusted them. Not completely. We learned that lesson long ago, back when we only had one world to lose. The awakening took 3 days. Ships rose from asteroids, from the dark side of moons, from places the Vethkai had already searched and declared empty. Factories that had pretended to make civilian goods switched to war production. Training programs that had been running in secret for generations finally called their students to service. The Vethkai noticed. Of course they noticed. But by the time they understood what was happening, it was too late. The counterattack began at Saturn. The Vethkai had positioned their main supply fleet there, confident that humanity was broken. 300 ships carrying fuel and weapons and soldiers for the final assault on Earth. The retribution arrived first. It came out of the dark like a nightmare. Weapons already firing. The Vethkai commander had just enough time to broadcast a desperate call for help. Then the rest of the Ember fleet appeared. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, every Vethkai ship was dead or dying. The retribution broadcast the sounds of their crew's final moments back to the Dominion's homeworld, letting them hear what was coming for them. Across the galaxy, the Concorde watched in shock. The Tyranny ambassador demanded answers. He sent message after message to Ambassador Vasquez, who had returned to Earth during the invasion. Where had these weapons come from? How had humanity hidden them? This was against every treaty, every agreement, every promise. Vasquez finally replied with a single sentence, "You never asked." The war changed after Saturn. The Vethkai were no longer hunters. They were prey. Human fleets pushed outward, retaking the moons and stations they had lost. The enemy fought hard, but they were not ready for what humanity had become. They had expected a dying species making a last desperate stand. Instead, they found something else entirely. They found a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill. Every battle in human history had taught them something. Every war, every conflict, every moment of violence had been studied and remembered. Now, all that knowledge, all that terrible experience was being used against the Vethkai. Human ships did not fight the way other species fought. They were unpredictable. They used tricks and traps. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They kept fighting when they should have been dead. The Vethkai commander sent a message to his emperor. These creatures are insane. They do not fear death. They welcome it if it means they can take us with them. On Axiom Prime, the council held an emergency session. The Tourney representative proposed sending aid to humanity now that victory seemed possible. Ambassador Vasquez, watching via hologram from Earth, laughed at him. "You want to help us now?" she said. "When we are winning? Where were you when Sao Paulo burned? Where were you when our children died screaming?" "Ambassador, please." "No." Her voice was cold. "You made your choice. Now we make ours. Humanity will remember who stood with us and who did not." The transmission ended. The council sat in uncomfortable silence. Dr. Tanaka, meanwhile, was already looking ahead. She knew that defeating the Vethkai fleet was not enough. The Dominion had conquered dozens of worlds. Their empire was vast and old. As long as it existed, humanity would never be safe. She presented her plan to Admiral Okoye. It was simple. It was brutal. It would end the war forever. "We take the fight to them," she said. "We burn their worlds the way they burned ours. We break their empire into pieces so small it can never threaten anyone again." Okoye looked at her for a long moment. "That will mean more death, millions more, maybe billions." "Yes. Is there another way?" Tanaka shook her head. "They attacked us because they thought we were weak. If we show mercy now, others will make the same mistake. Humanity must never be seen as weak again." Okoye thought about his mother. He thought about Lagos, now just ash and memory. He thought about all the people who had died because the galaxy had looked at humanity and seen something that could be easily crushed. He gave the order. 1 week later, the Retribution and its fleet jumped to hyperspace. Their destination was Vethkai territory. Their mission was simple. Before they left, they broadcast a message to the Dominion. It was received on every world, every ship, every station in their empire. Just one sentence, spoken in every known language. We are coming. The stars themselves seemed to shiver. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. It had poked a sleeping giant. It had kicked a hornet's nest. It had pushed a species past its breaking point and then turned its back. Now that species was awake, and it was angry. God help anyone who stood in its way. The invasion of Vethkai space took 2 years. Admiral Okoye led the fleet himself. He stood on the bridge of the Retribution day after day, watching worlds fall. The Dominion had seemed so powerful when they attacked Earth. Now they crumbled like sandcastles before a rising tide. The first system they reached was called Keth Vora in the Dominion's language. It was a military outpost, heavily defended. The Vethkai commander there was famous for his cruelty. He had personally overseen the destruction of 3 species. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, Okoye broadcast a message to the survivors. Surrender and you will be treated fairly. Fight and you will die. There is no third option. Most of them surrendered. They had heard stories about what had happened at Saturn. They had heard the screams of their comrades, broadcast across the stars. Word spread quickly through the Dominion. The humans were coming. The humans could not be stopped. The humans were monsters. But something unexpected happened as the fleet pushed deeper into enemy territory. On the 3rd world they reached, they found prisoners. Not Vethkai prisoners. Others, species that the Dominion had conquered long ago, kept alive as slaves and worse. The first prison camp Okoye's soldiers opened held creatures called the Sheth. They were small, gentle beings with large eyes and soft fur. The Vethkai had hunted them for sport. They had killed 90% of their population. The survivors had been kept in cages, brought out for entertainment when their masters grew bored. When human soldiers broke down the doors, the Sheth did not understand. They had forgotten that anyone could be kind. They had forgotten that help could come. A young Marine named Sophia was the first to enter. She saw the cages. She saw the scars. She saw the fear in those large, dark eyes. She sat down on the ground, making herself small. She held out her hand, palm up, and waited. It took a long time, but finally one of the Sheth reached out and touched her fingers. "It's okay," Sophia said. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." The Sheth did not have a home anymore. The Vethkai had burned it. But humanity gave them something else. A place on the ships. Food, medicine, protection, and slowly, carefully, hope. As the fleet moved forward, they found more prisoners, more survivors, species that the Concord had written off as extinct, species that had been screaming for help into an empty universe for centuries. Humanity freed them all. The Turani ambassador tried again to contact Vasquez. He offered ships. He offered soldiers. He offered anything humanity wanted if they would just allow the Concord to be part of this. Vasquez's reply was short. "You had your chance to stand with us. Now you can watch." The final battle came at Veth Prime, the heart of the Dominion. It was a massive world, dark and cold, covered in fortresses and weapons platforms. The Vethkai Emperor himself waited there, surrounded by his last defenders. They fought hard. Okoye would give them that much. They knew they were going to die, and they chose to die fighting rather than surrender. For 3 days and nights, the battle raged across the planet's surface and through its skies. In the end, humanity won. They always won now. Okoye walked through the ruins of the Emperor's palace. The walls were covered in trophies from conquered worlds, skulls and bones and things he did not want to look at too closely. He found the Emperor's body in the throne room. The creature had killed itself rather than face capture. Even in death, its face was twisted with hate. A young lieutenant followed Okoye inside. He looked at the destruction all around them, at the smoke rising from the burning city, at the bodies of enemies who had chosen death over surrender. "Admiral," he said, "did we win?" Okoye stood there for a long moment. He thought about the last 2 years. He thought about the worlds they had burned, the soldiers they had lost, the things they had done. He thought about Sophia and the Sheth. He thought about the slaves they had freed, the prison camps they had opened, the hope they had given to those who had none. He thought about Earth, still rebuilding from wounds that would take generations to heal. "We survived," he said finally. "Winning is something else." The fleet returned home slowly. They brought the survivors with them, the Sheth and the others. They brought recordings of everything they had found. They brought proof of what the Dominion had done, proof that could never be denied or forgotten. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the soldiers who came back were different from the ones who had left. They were quieter, harder. They had seen what they were capable of, and some of them did not like what they saw. Okoye retired from the military 1 year later. He built a small house on a hill overlooking the sea, far from any city. He planted a garden. He tried to remember what peace felt like. Some nights he dreamed about the screams, the enemy screams, his own people's screams. They all sounded the same after a while. He never spoke about the war. When people asked him about it, he just shook his head and changed the subject. The galaxy would remember humanity as conquerors, as warriors, as the species that rose from nothing and broke an empire. Okoye just remembered the cost. But even he had to admit, as he watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red, that the cost had been worth paying. Humanity was safe, for now, for always. That was enough. 10 years passed. Ambassador Vasquez returned to Axiom Prime on a spring morning, though spring meant nothing on a station orbiting a dead star. She was older now. Her hair was completely white, and she walked with a cane. But her eyes were still sharp, still strong, still remembering everything. The council chamber had not changed. The same crystal walls, the same floating chairs, the same 12 species, watching her with expressions that ranged from fear to respect to something that might have been shame. But Vasquez had not come alone. Behind her walked representatives of 7 new species. The Sheth, small and gentle, their large eyes no longer filled with fear. The Karathi, tall and proud, freed from Dominion slave pits. The Mendra, the Veth, the Osari, and 2 others who had no names left, their identities stolen by centuries of conquest. Humanity had given them their voices back. Now they would use them. The Tarani ambassador rose from his chair. He was older too. His silver skin had dulled with age, and his 4 hands shook slightly as he spoke. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, "the council welcomes you." "Does it?" Vasquez replied. "I seem to remember a different welcome once." Silence. The old wound hung in the air between them. "We have prepared a formal apology," the Tarani continued, "a recognition of our failure. We hope that humanity can forgive us and that we can move forward together." Vasquez looked at him for a long moment. She thought about that day, 10 years ago, when she had stood alone in this chamber and watched the galaxy turn its back on her people. She thought about Sao Paulo, about Mumbai, about Lagos, about all the cities that were still being rebuilt, all the graves that were still being dug. She thought about the soldiers who had come home broken, about Okoye hiding in his house by the sea, trying to forget, about all the young people who had learned what war really meant. Then she thought about Sophia, the young Marine who had sat on the floor of a prison camp and offered her hand to frightened survivors, about the Sheth representative standing behind her, alive and free, about all the species that had been given a second chance because humanity had refused to die quietly. Forgiveness, she said slowly, is not something I can give. That belongs to the dead, and they are not here to speak. The Tyranni's face fell. But, Vasquez continued, humanity does not want revenge. We have had enough of war. What we want is change. She pressed a button on her cane. A holographic document appeared in the center of the chamber, floating where everyone could see it. This is a new compact, she said. A new set of rules for this council. It includes protections for smaller species. It includes a promise, a real promise, that no member will ever be abandoned again. And it includes seats for the peoples the Dominion conquered, the peoples you forgot existed. The representatives read the document in silence. Some of them frowned. Some of them whispered to each other. The Meridian speaker, the being made of living crystal, was the first to object. This would reduce our influence. The elder species have always led the council. Yes, Vasquez said, and look where that leadership brought us. Look at the graves. Look at the empty worlds. Look at what your wisdom accomplished. The Meridian had no answer. The vote took 3 hours. There was arguing. There was complaining. There were threats and promises and everything in between. In the end, the new compact passed, not because the elder species wanted it, but because they were afraid of what would happen if they refused. Humanity had shown what it could do when pushed too far. No one wanted to see that again. Vasquez watched the final count appear on the display. 12 votes in favor, 0 against. She allowed herself a small smile. It was not the same as the smile she had worn 10 years ago, when she still believed in the Concord's promises. This smile was harder, wiser, bought with blood, but it was real. Far away on Earth, life continued. The scars of the war were healing slowly. New buildings rose where old ones had fallen. Children played in parks that had been built on top of rubble. Dr. Tanaka, now very old and confined to a wheelchair, visited the museum that had been built inside the Retribution. The great ship hung in orbit above Earth, decommissioned but preserved, a reminder of what humanity had survived. A class of school children was touring the ship when she arrived. They were young, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They had been born after the war. They knew about it only from history books and their grandparents' stories. One of the children noticed the old woman in the wheelchair. She recognized her face from the museum's displays. "You're Dr. Tanaka," the child said. "You built this ship." Tanaka smiled. "I did, a long time ago." "Were you scared when the aliens attacked?" Tanaka thought about the question. She thought about the terror of those first days when everyone believed humanity was about to die. She thought about the desperate work in hidden factories, trying to wake the sleeping machines in time. She thought about all the people who had died and all the people who had killed. "Yes," she said, "I was scared. Everyone was scared. But you won. We survived. That is not quite the same thing." The child frowned, not understanding. She would learn someday. She would grow up and understand that victory always comes with a price, but not today. Today, she was just a child on a field trip, looking at old weapons and wondering at the adults who had built them. Tanaka watched the children move on, their teacher herding them toward the next exhibit. She sat in the silent observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Ambassador Vasquez was building a new future. Somewhere out there, the Sheth and the Karathi and all the others were learning what it meant to be free. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was changing, slowly, painfully, into something better. And somewhere, in a house by the sea, an old admiral was watching the sunset and trying to find peace. Tanaka closed her eyes. She was tired. She had been tired for a very long time. but she was also proud. Humanity had faced the darkness and survived. They had done terrible things, yes. They had also done wonderful things. They had freed the slaves and burned the slavers. They had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, the darkness and the light both. Now it was up to the next generation to decide which one would define them. The stars waited, patient and eternal, to see what humanity would become. And far below, on 1,000 worlds, the fire burned on.